Hey everyone,
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
going on? Woo! We are here with the third Young Vlogger Roundtable live stream. I'm excited. A little bit nervous, but this is exciting. We got the legendary Andrew James, Jake Truman, James Beardwell,
Hello,
all
everybody.
amazing young filmmakers and vloggers. We're super excited to bring you guys this stream today. And today we're going to be talking about maximizing your gear and getting the most out of your gear. Should you buy expensive camera gear? Should you buy cheap camera gear? Today we're going to be talking about it. And hope you guys enjoy. Hope you guys learn something new. You guys have anything to say? Andrew?
Nope, that sounds great. Perfect.
All right.
Oh,
I
good.
think we should just get straight into it. Get to the business. All right. So first thing we're going to be talking about is getting the right gear for your needs. Obviously, there are so many cameras out there. There's probably thousands of different cameras and lenses and mounts and all kinds of cool stuff. But sometimes those stuff aren't useful for you. But sometimes they are. So today I'm just gonna talk a little bit about what kind of gear you should get and what kind of gear is out there. And starting with the types of cameras. There's a lot of different types of cameras nowadays. Before, it obviously just started with film cameras, which used real film, and to edit that, you would just cut the film. That was your only way of editing it. But now there's digital cameras, which are a lot more advanced and can do lots of stuff. There's DSLRs, which are a little bit bigger. There's mirrorless, which are really taking over the market now. What cameras do you guys use? Just wondering.
I use the Canon Rebel T6i, and I recently got it not too long ago, and so far it's been it's suited my needs, and I really love it.
I use the
Nice.
Canon 700D or T5i with an 18 to 135 millimeter lens, and it's really good for me.
I'm right at the bottom, so we had the T6i, T5i. I'm the T4i, and then I also use two lenses. I use a 10 to 18 millimeter and a 50 millimeter 1.8. So
Nice. And those are all cameras that are they obviously have getting really good image quality from your videos, but they aren't that expensive camera gear. And people think sometimes that you need these like huge expensive cameras to be able to get like good images, but that's not true at all. Because I mean, look at your guys' videos and my videos too. I use a Canon SX60HS which is a point and shoot camera.
It's like,
It is a point and
camera?
shoot. Yeah, it's a it has the form factor of a DSLR, but it's still a point and shoot. It has still has a 1-inch sensor.
For my first camera, I got
exactly
something
like
similar
that.
to you.
Yeah. So obviously the sensor isn't that big, and the image quality isn't as good as you might as you can get from obviously all the different cameras, but you can obviously get amazing quality from, as you guys can see from my videos and your guys' videos. You don't really need expensive gear to get all that kind of stuff.
Agreed.
yeah, absolutely. Just to add on to that, I mean, I got my camera 2 years ago, and it's gone down in price, but I got it on eBay for $400 with an 18 to 55 millimeter lens, and I got it by selling things on eBay and selling sodas in my neighborhood and at the skate park.
Nice.
And it's not that expensive, and I wasn't making any money from anything besides that, so it's really, really doable to get any of those cameras.
And another thing, back then cameras used to be so expensive because they were new technology. People were designing new things. It was harder to design a camera, and I think that is sort of carried over with people nowadays. They think cameras are still expensive. You still need to spend a lot of money to get a decent camera. But the technology has grown so much that you can get a really good camera for under $500.
You don't even need to spend more money. Like my phone shoots 4K at 30 frames a second. That's more than my camera. I can honestly, like I have different kinds of apps that give me more access to features on this phone, but this is just a regular phone, iPhone 7. And even like phones that go back a few years, they still shoot 4K. They still shoot 1080 at 60, which I know even some of your guys' cameras don't even do. Mine doesn't. 1080 at 60, and this phone is doing 4K. Like so much power in the palm of your hand. You really don't need to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on big cinema cameras and lenses to make videos. And especially in this YouTube world, people or in any internet video, people don't really notice the difference between like a red and a like good DSLR.
So
exactly.
I just saw someone in the chat say, please clean your camera lens. I just want to address, there's a crack. I'm using my phone, and there's a crack that goes right over the camera lens. So it's not a smudge. It's a crack.
Yeah, guys.
Just to address that.
And there's obviously a lot of different types of cameras. There's point and shoots and mirrorless and DSLR, cinema cameras. What are you guys' opinions of? I get a lot of questions like, what camera should I buy from people just starting out? I'm sure you guys get the same question as well. What's your opinion on that? Like for YouTube, for more advanced movies, more films.
So go ahead, Andrew or James. Sorry.
So it really, you've got to really think about what you'll be using your camera for. For example, you could be a diver, and obviously you're not really going to buy a DSLR or a point and shoot for that. You would go for something like a GoPro or another waterproof action camera. Whereas someone like me, I like to do cinematics and often vlog. So I went for a DSLR rather than a point and shoot, just because a DSLR is more flexible when trying to create better cinematic sequences. And I think with the lenses that you can get with it, it just gives it a little bit nicer image than a point and shoot. So that's what I went for. Whereas someone like a Tua Moy and other vloggers who are moving around a lot, climbing trees, Atua uses a G7X, which is a point and shoot, just because he can fit it into his pocket, and that's really good, and he can whip it out anytime he wants.
Yeah,
I like what you said, James. And people need to remember that these companies who are designing these cameras, they have really smart people who are designing these cameras, and they're designed to take a good quality pictures, videos, whatever you want them to do. So honestly, I think that if you get a decent camera, no matter what it is, you're going to be happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as the debate between DSLRs and mirrorless, I'd say if you can, at this point, you're going to want to go with the mirrorless. I mean, just to be specific, obviously, I like what James and Jake said, where you want to find what's suited for you. But if you're going for a vlog or cinematics, like a good mirrorless that I kind of wish was around when I bought my first camera would be like the Panasonic G7. That's a mirrorless. It shoots 1080-60. It shoots 4K, sort of, not fully, but pretty much 4K. So that's a really good camera to start off with. So it's about $600. So if you can, I would suggest definitely saving up for that. But if you can't, then like they said, go for like a point and shoot or like or just whatever suits your needs, whether it be a GoPro or a DSLR.
And so with my camera, it's a DSLR. It has a mirror, and the reason why I decided to go for that camera is because I wanted to take pictures. And I know that the viewfinder, it's not going to be cropped or anything. So that's another thing to decide whenever you're looking for cameras is, are you just going to take video, or are you going to also take some photos and maybe get into photography? So that's another deciding factor that should be taken into account.
Yeah, obviously, but almost all cameras now do photo and video, but there are cameras that are more specific to photo than video, and depends on your needs. If you're doing YouTube, you obviously are going to be probably doing more video, and then you should go for a camera that has better video features than a camera with more photo-based features. And we were just talking about DSLR and mirrorless lenses, and a big difference about DSLR and mirrorless cameras versus point and shoots and action cameras is that you can put whatever lens you want on a DSLR or mirrorless camera, which is a big advantage because you can a lens really helps you tell a different kind of story. If you're using a wide angle, you can see more of your subject, and you can see a lot more of what's going on. If you're using a tight focal length, you're really focusing in on one aspect of your story.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can go, James. Sorry.
So yeah, it's bringing on to buying, just like we said with cameras, with having a mirrorless and a DSLR, it means you can really think about what you're going to be doing more, so you buy the lens best suited to you.
Right. Yeah, I think some people tend to forget, and I know a lot of people hear this but it really is about the glass. It's a lot about the lens.
Yeah.
And the reason why I chose to get a DSLR instead of a point and shoot, and this isn't to discourage people if you have a point and shoot, but if you're a guy looking, you can really build off of a DSLR a lot more than a point and shoot because of the option of lenses. There's so many different things you can do with lenses, and I'm sure some of you guys, if you watch videos, you can see videos of people with like a really high quality camera body with a cheap lens, and then a cheaper or less expensive camera body with an expensive lens. And every single time, the camera with the good lens, the good glass, always is a way better shot. So having the option to upgrade lenses is so important. So
yeah, a lot of people just invest in the camera themselves, and then they don't have the money left to spend on a lens, and they have to buy a kit lens or something like that. And like the point of investing in good cameras to get a good image, but if you put soft glass on it, it's not going to be any better than like your phone,
right,
or something like that.
And to add on what Andrew said about the glass matters a lot compared to the body. I mean, both of them matter, but I recently watched a video, I think it was by Digital Rev, and it was kind of a comedic video, but it had a really good point. The host took a cheaper body and put a really nice lens on it, and he went out and took some photos, and then he took a really high-end Canon 1DX, I think it was, and he put a cheap lens on it, and the photos from the cheaper body but with the more expensive lens obviously came out better. So yeah.
Every time they will.
But then again, you don't need these like to tell your story. It's all about your story. You don't need these big expensive cameras to tell your story. All these cameras don't matter unless you're getting your point across. People aren't going to care that you're shooting in 8K with cinema glass and it's razor sharp and it's super slow-mo if it doesn't tell them a story, if they can't connect to what you're saying.
Right. So like, even though like we're talking about gear so much in this video, like everyone take this with a grain of salt. We're not saying like this is just the reason why we're talking so much about gear is because this is specific live stream is about gear. So just take what we're saying with a grain of salt. We're not saying this is required. We're just having a conversation about what we think is the best.
Yeah, and so most of the things we're saying could be opinions. So again, some of it might not be factual. So like what Andrew said, take it with a grain of salt.
And I think we should talk a little bit about other people obviously ask me like what camera to get. So when do you think someone should get a new camera? Because obviously you get to a certain point in your skill level where a camera is not functional for you anymore. You've passed that skill level. You need a better quality camera. So when do you guys think someone should upgrade their camera per se? Because I get this question a lot.
I think somebody. Go ahead, Jen. Go ahead, Jen. Okay. We're being too nice here. We're being too polite. I think someone should upgrade their camera whenever they understand fully what their camera is capable of, and whenever they're not getting the type of shot that they want. So in filmmaking, your main goal is to get whatever you're imagining in here to the outside world and to present that to somebody else. And whenever you have a cheaper camera, and you can't present that in the way that you would like, it's most likely time to upgrade.
Yeah. And if you adding to what you said, if you don't, people can buy like a big expensive red camera per se, which is a $50,000 camera, but if they don't know how to use the settings and composition and all the filming techniques, it's not going to do anything to them. It's not going to the image might look better, but it's not going to make much of a difference versus shooting on your iPhone and saying you know all of the filming techniques and using all the shutter speed and apertures and stuff like that to get the best image. If you just buy a red camera and use auto settings, it's obviously not going to look very good, which is a good segue to our next topic, which is camera settings and what you can do inside your camera to get a better image. Because a lot of people buy cameras and they just put it on auto and start recording, and that's fine. People can do that, but if you really want to get the most out of your gear, you're going to want to know what different settings in your camera does and what you can do to better the quality of your image. And I think we started off by one of the most important things, there's sorry, starter. One of the most important things is shutter speed. The shutter speed you're shooting, and the camera sensor. The way a camera works is it has a mirror, and it opens and closes to let light in and let an image in. And the shutter speed controls how fast and how long the sensor will stay open, how much light will come into the camera, but it also changes how much motion blur you're going to have. For example, my camera right now is recording at 30 frames a second at a 30 shutter speed. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of motion blur when I'm moving my hand. But if it were to record in a much higher shutter speed, it would be no motion blur at all, which gives a different feeling. So it really changes your image. A general rule that people tell you in film school is that you should always keep your shutter speed double your frame rate, which we'll talk about in a second. So if you're shooting at 60 frames a second, you should have your shutter speed at 120. If you're shooting at 24 frames a second, you should have your shutter speed at 48. But these are just rules rules that people make up, and you can always break these. But the important thing to know is what the settings does. So when you break it, you know what different stuff does. So if you're shooting a sequence and you want to give it a dreamy feel, it's a dream of someone, you won't want to shoot it with a lower shutter speed. So there's more motion blur and it looks more like a dream. And if you're shooting an action sequence with people shooting and guns and stuff like that, you might want to shoot it with a really high shutter speed to give it an intense look.
Right.
And Orion, before we move on to settings, I just wanted to talk about the diminishing returns on cameras real fast.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Go ahead.
With cameras and a lot of other things, as you move up in price, it's called diminishing returns. As you move up in price, the jump in quality decreases. So I started out my channel with my phone, and from there I went with my Canon Rebel T6i, which is a big jump. There's a big difference in price. And so if I were to switch from my Canon to, let's say, like a Canon 80D, it's a jump in price, but I'm not going to get that much quality. I guess a better example would be like
going up from a GoPro to a DSLR. Going up from a GoPro to I don't know, $600, $800 DSLR mirrorless, you're going to get a huge quality jump. You're going to get a big sensor. You're going to be able to put lenses on it, and the quality is going to go up a huge amount. But then if you go and spend $50,000 more and buy a cinema camera, the quality might not go up as much as you did spending only a few $100s. So the more you spend, the less you're going to get for your money. If you buy a $6,000 camera versus a $1,000 camera, the quality is only going to go up a little bit, but the price is going to go up a huge amount. But if you go from a GoPro to a DSLR or a point and shoot, the price is only going up a little bit, but the quality is going up a huge amount.
You've also got to know, so obviously there is a slight difference between a $50,000 cinema camera and an $800 DSLR.
Yes.
But the rate at which, so say you have a graph, the rate slowly begins to level out. And of course, obviously, if you didn't know anything about camera settings, what we've talked about, there's no point in changing. So you could give a 5-year-old girl a GoPro and a DSLR, and there would be no difference in the footage that you would get, because obviously, I don't know why I just use 5-year-old girl, 5-year-old boy as well, or any person that doesn't know anything about cameras, camera settings, and there just would not be a difference. So you do need to know camera settings. You do need to understand the difference between the two cameras and what a GoPro is mainly used for, what a DSLR is mainly used for. So that is one of the most important things as well.
Yeah, definitely. And is that, I think we should get back to settings, right? Do you have anything else to say about this? So we're just talking about shutter speed. What is your opinion on shutter speed? What do you guys use? Do you guys stick to rules? Do you just break the rules, just try and expose, use manual settings or not?
So I just I'm still learning with my camera, so I just use a shutter speed that I think looks the best. But one thing that I think is important to remember is that you can't have a faster shutter speed than your frame rate. So let's say you're having 60 frames per second.
You mean a
and you're
lower
using-
shutter speed?
Yeah, you can't have a lower shutter. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
a lower shutter speed. So if you're filming in 60 frames a second, your shutter speed won't be able to go below 60 frames per second. So typically people would use 60. One. I just completely lost my train of thought. If you're going to use 60 FPS, it's going to be more suited for an action sequence, and also you could slow it down. And then a 24 frames per second footage is going to have a lower. You can bring the shutter speed down lower and get that silky smooth footage with the. It's going to have more motion blur and feel more like a cinematic clip.
Well, yeah, because the Hollywood standard is 24 frames a second. Whenever you see 24 frames a second, you kind of go back to, you feel like you're watching a movie, and it really brings feel like you're watching a good cinematic movie.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah, go on.
Sorry. On the subject of shutter speeds, a lot of times I like to use more of a motion blur simply because that's the most realistic. This is why people use low shutter speeds, is because when I see something in real life, I see a car zoom by. It's not like I see crisp individual images of this car moving by. I see a motion blur. So most of the time I like to lean more towards lower shutter speeds simply because of that reason. I like the realistic feel.
Yeah, it looks
more immersive.
More real. And you were just talking about how you should never keep your shutter speed under your frame rate, and I think that's a good transition to talk about frame rates. And the frame rate is how much frames is going to be in a video. A video is just a picture that has motion. That's why it's called a motion picture. It's a sequence of images put together to make it look like real life, like it's moving. So the frame rate is how many frames you're going to have in a second. If you're shooting at 24 frames a second, every 24 shots, your camera is going to take 24 shots every second and put it into a video. If you're shooting at 30 frames a second, your camera is going to take 30 photos in a second and put it into video. If you go up to 120, 60, and it goes up. And the more frames it shoots, the slower you can slow it down, because there's more frames. It's you have more room to play with.
Less your dreams.
But the more frames you have, the higher the frame rate you're using, the more crispy your image is going to look. Because if you have 100 frames in 1 second, then you're going to have a lot more detail because each frame covers a tiny amount of time. But if you have 24 frames a second, each frame covers more time. So there's more movement in between each frame.
Yeah, so that's where you got to think of. So for say, like when I or Andrew does a really cool flip, or Orion, and he slows it down. Because it's a T4i, the frame rate maximum goes 30 frames a second in 1080p. And luckily, Final Cut Pro has something called optical flow, where it makes its own sort of fake frame, and it's really realistic. But say you had a camera that you could do a higher frame rate, and you would do something really fast motion. So say you were skydiving or something. I've never really seen a skydiving video in slow motion, so I've always seen it going really fast, so you don't have to have your frame rate as high. Whereas say you were doing a really nice cinematic sequence, you wanted it to be really nice and slow and calm, you would shoot it in a higher frame rate so that you could slow it down in post, and it gives a really nice effect.
Yeah, and this is really depending what kind of story, again, you want to tell. It's all of these go back to the story. The story is always king in filmmaking. If you want it to be really slow and calm, then you might shoot it at a high frame rate to be able to slow it down. And if you want it super like action sequence, if it's a fighting sequence or if someone's running away from something, you might shoot it at 24 frames a second to make it more blurry and more intense.
Yeah.
And one thing that's kind of off topic, but I really like that Orion said, he told me one time, he said, film for the edit. So if you're going to go out and film something, you need to decide, how do you want this to look before you start filming? If you film something and pan really fast or whip really fast, and then you go back to the edit to your editor and you try to slow that down, it's not going to look as good because you can tell that you changed your mind. So film for the edit, and I think that's a really good point, even though it's off topic, but it's really important.
We'll go more in depth to that later, yeah. But and then the next big thing with cameras, the third main element is the aperture you're using, and this is the shutter speed controls how long the lens is open for, but the aperture controls how fast the lens opens and closes. So the higher your aperture is, the more is going to be in focus, and the lower you bring your aperture, you can get a nice depth of field. That's how people get blurry backgrounds, for example. They shoot in a really low aperture, which is a 1.4 or 1.8 or something like that, which gets a nice motion blur. And again, it's all about the story. This gives a different element to the story. Maybe you're shooting a little insect or something, and you just want to focus on this little crab walking around the sand. So you want to shoot it at a 1.4 or 1.8 aperture, so everything else is blurred, and you're just focusing in on your subject, on your one thing that everyone wants, that you want people to focus on. Or you're shooting a big landscape with a person walking. You're following someone, and he's walking into this big mountainscape. So you may want to shoot it at a high aperture, so you can see everything around them.
So yeah,
so go ahead, James. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so with the aperture, because a low aperture means the hole in the lens is quite large, whereas with a higher aperture, higher number, it means the hole is smaller. So obviously that is one of the things you have to control, because with the hole being different sizes, the iris being different sizes, it means different amounts of light will be let in. So when you are manually adjusting the settings, obviously if you make it a high shutter speed, then that means less light is coming in. That you also want to compromise with using aperture. So maybe if the subject was not so much of a landscape, so you wouldn't really mind opening up the iris, meaning that there is a smaller depth of field, but you are letting light in to the sensor more, then it means you can even out your exposure, your whole exposure. So that is another point on knowing how to use the camera settings well.
Yeah, if you don't know how to use these settings, let's say you're leaving it on auto. What auto settings does, it just exposes your image properly. So it may bring down your shutter speed a whole lot, so you might have a lot of motion blur, and might bring up the aperture a ton, so everything's in focus, and you might not want that. So this is where really knowing what your camera can do and what every little setting does really helps out to get the best image you can possibly get. And another big thing, this goes a little bit more into post-production as well, but the picture profile you're shooting in, which is how colorful and the colors you have in your image. Now cameras can shoot in many different picture styles. You can make your greens pop, or you can make them dull. You can bring up the saturation. You can shoot in log, which lets you retain more dynamic range, which is a flatter profile, but you can color grade it later so it looks exactly the way you want it. And this is another big thing, because color is huge. Color is so important. People a lot of time disregard color, but it's a huge aspect in films and vlogs and everything, really.
Exactly. So let me put out an example. Aidan from Digital Blast, when he made his film Eclipse, he was shooting in broad daylight. Actually, I think it may have been at golden hour, which is at the time of sunset, after sunset, or before sunrise. But in post, he put an effect, a day into night effect, that made it look like nighttime. So obviously, when he was filming, he was thinking about how he was going to color the video, and he obviously knew he was going to make it this look nighttime, because obviously the film was about an eclipse. So when an eclipse happens, it goes dark. So he had to think about the colors, and that's what everyone has to sort of do. So I've recently started color grading because I've been able to, because I started using Final Cut Pro. So I've started to try and get the flattest image on my camera, which means you have a low contrast, low saturation, meaning it's obviously the best for color grading. So when, say, I'm in the forest, I'm thinking about, I know it's all the lovely greens and colors around me, so I know I'm going to bring up the saturation in post to make it look a little bit more realistic and a little bit nicer. So that's what you've got to think about. Maybe you are going to a desert and you want it to look really amazing, lovely blue sky. You've got to think about how you're going to color grade it in post.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a good transition to move on to our next topic, which is the filming techniques, because you can have your settings again. You can get the right gear, you can have the great settings, but without good composition and movement and stability and stuff like that, your films still won't look as good as you might want them to. That's something that before I learned a lot of this, I would always look at people's videos and I would say, but I'm using the same camera and the same camera settings. Why aren't my videos looking like that? And a lot of it was their filming, like the way they filmed it. So their composition, the movement they put in their shots, it really makes a big difference.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think motion in your videos is honestly one of the most important things you can do.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, that's something that I've recently focused a lot on. And I just love the motion. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so attracted to like hyperlapses, moving time lapses, because although it's such a subtle thing, if you have a tripod shot of something, or if you have like a swooping, moving shot of something, it can make it so much more interesting and engaging. If I'm watching a tripod shot, no matter how interesting the subject is, no matter how much the colors are popping, if I'm not moving, if I'm not pushing the story, the narrative along with the camera movements, I'm getting bored. So camera movements is a super powerful tool.
Yeah.
And in movies, there's sort of a rule for feature films that you don't move the camera unless the story pushes the narrative along. So if I'm making an edit and I'm learning to flip maybe or something like that, I'm going to have the camera moving a lot to show that I'm moving forward, or just to have the energy, the vibe of me learning something new and excitement. But if it's sort of a slow, draggy day of like a rain sequence, maybe I'll have a lot more still shots just to show that it's sort of just a mopey, drowsy sort of day, you know? So people underestimate the importance of movement in your cameras.
Yeah. And there's obviously so many different types of movements. You can push into your subject, you can pull out of your subject, you can parallax them, which is moving around your subject but keeping in the same place but moving the background. All of these give a different feeling to your film.
So also talking about the movement, you can kind of bring hyperlapses and time lapses into this, because it's not necessarily moving, but the subject is moving obviously a lot. And the first time I really saw this used effectively was in Casey Neistat's videos, when he was using time lapses to show that time is passing. So obviously at the end of the video he would have a time lapse of the sunset. If he'd ended it at nighttime, maybe he just did his vlog in the morning and he wouldn't end the video necessarily with sunset. So he's really using his time lapses and the places around him to show the story, to portray what's going on.
Yeah.
So I really liked what Andrew said about how motion can inflict a feeling in someone. And also there's something to think about, that the human brain, it gets bored looking at the same thing for a long period of time.
Sure.
So if you have a still shot, but you don't have a very interesting subject, then you might want to put motion into it to change the perspective and stimulate the viewer's mind. So that's one thing that I need to work on. Actually, I need to work on a lot of things, but that's something to take in consideration. If you don't have an interesting subject, then you should probably put motion to keep stimulating the viewer's mind.
Even if you have an interesting subject, it's a lot more dynamic to add movement to your shots. And even if maybe you're shooting yourself, so you can't add movement, changing the camera angles is still a good dynamic to it feels a little bit like the camera's moving and the person's moving. And adding to movement, if you're moving with movement, makes it feel a lot more like you're there with the person. Because usually when you're walking with someone, if you see someone walking down the street, you're going to walk with them. You're not going to just stand still and watch them pass by. You're going to be moving along with them, talking to them, or walking around with them. So if you have a sequence of someone walking, or maybe you're walking, if you can have someone follow you, it feels a lot more like the viewer is there with you, watching you right there.
Agreed.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hello.
sorry. On the subject of motion, the last thing I'm going to say, movement. I recently invested in a Zion crane, and I'm not saying that you have to have like a crane or anything like that to get motion, because you don't. I didn't have one for a very long time. But I was talking to my parents about it because it's not a cheap piece of equipment, and my parents just couldn't get it. They were like, "Why are putting this much money into something like that? Like, why is it so important?" And I said, movement is so subtle. When you're filming a video, when someone's watching a movie, when I'm watching a movie or a video, I'm not thinking, oh, wow, look, the camera's moving right now. How cool is that? No, it's a subtle thing, and the mind isn't really thinking about it while you're watching it, but it adds a lot to your film. So even though it's subtle, that doesn't mean that it doesn't add a lot.
Yeah. And that's a great transition. The fact that you just got the Zen crane, which is stabilizer, is stability. Another film technique, which is get stability in your shots, having stable shots, which is a very important thing to do. People that aren't filmmakers don't really think about, I guess, stability when they're watching something. They just, because obviously when you're watching something in your eyes, it's pretty stable. So when you watch a movie, they don't really think about the fact that you're trying to keep it as smooth as possible. But the thing is, like, if you're just shooting around, holding your camera like this, it's going to be shaky, and it's not going to be very fun to watch it. So getting really smooth shots is important. But then again, you can also have like moving your camera around and having it shaky is a different technique to create action and more an action sequence. If you're running or trying to make it super intense, you might want to move the camera around, make it a handheld look, which is a different kind of look, a different kind of feeling.
Yeah, I was actually just about to mention that. The Hunger Games, I know it's a long time ago, but it's sort of notorious for having a lot of shaky cam.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why they do it, and I like stability a lot, but at certain times, I think shaky cam can really evoke a lot of emotion in a person, because throughout the Hunger Games, this is why they used it, is because it feels like everything's so hectic and they have no control. So by using a shaky cam, it adds that feeling of there's no control, it's hectic, it's chaotic. So you don't necessarily have to use stable movement.
Definitely.
Just movement in general will evoke motion, and you have to learn how to manipulate what it evokes in a person.
But and going back to stability, actual stability, there's many different kind of ways to get smooth shots. There's obviously stabilizer, but those can go up to thousands of dollars, which a lot of people don't have the budget to spend on something that will keep your camera steady. So there's different kinds of techniques that you can use, and cheaper stuff that can also provide super stable motion. So things like something that I do all the time, because a lot of times when I'm vlogging and I want to get a cinematic sequence, I don't have a stabilizer. But if I would have a stabilizer, I might not have the time to put it all together and balance and all that. What I do is I put the camera strap around my neck and I hold it out, and then it gives pressure so it doesn't move around and shake all the time. And this keeps it really steady, and I can get some nice motion by really putting pressure on the strap and then moving my body or hands along while keeping it flexed the whole time. And that's something that really helps getting smooth shot. Another thing is walking really steadily, because obviously when you're walking normally and you're just holding a camera, the impact of your feet is going to shake the camera a lot. But you can walk. A good technique that I always do is, imagine you're holding a full cup of hot coffee and you're gotta walk super gently, otherwise you'll spill the hot coffee all over yourself. So what I like to do is just bend my knees a little bit and walk really flat. So not walk toes and then heel, just walk really flat and make my knees absorb the whole impact of the movement of my steps, and also my elbows, have them a little loose, so they absorb all of the impact and my camera stays super steady. And that's a technique that I use when I don't have a glide cam, but what I do is I take my tripod out and I just extend it. And that's another example that you don't need this big expensive gear. A glide cam is like $300-400. I just use my tripod and I extend it out, and I just walk super steadily, and it gets this nice smooth shot, exactly like a glide cam. It might be more hard. A glide cam, you don't need to put as much effort into getting smooth shots because it has a gimbal on it. But by getting the techniques on, walking super smoothly and steadily, I am getting really smooth shots by just using a normal tripod that costs like $30.
Yeah.
And so another thing, whenever you're trying to get stability without using any kind of mechanism or gimbal, you might have to refilm something. So something that I do is if I
Definitely.
feel myself jerk the camera, then I'll refilm that
Hmm.
scene to try to get it more smooth. So
Oh yeah,
it
one
does
of
take practice, and you might have to refilm some things. So don't be satisfied with the film you have if you think it won't look good.
yeah, I for almost all of my like cinematic sequences and travel films, every shot I film about 4, 5 times maybe. Especially here in Costa Rica, we have like rocks and it's all dirt roads and potholes. So it's really hard to get super smooth motion because it's always jerking around. So a lot of times I have to film stuff 3, 4, 5 times maybe. But don't give up because you'll really be happy with the smooth shots when you get into the editing. With whether you have like, sorry, lost my. Anyway, if you don't do the retake and you just say, okay, it's fine, I'll fix and post, I'll put warp stabilizer or something on it, you'll really regret it when you get into the editing room and start editing, and you'll be like, oh, why didn't I take the extra 10 seconds and just press the record button again and do the take again. You'll really be satisfied with doing it again. And just kind of check your camera, record it, check your camera again, and go over, make sure that it's nice and smooth, and do the best you can.
And I'm sure that's happened to all of us and everyone who has gone into filmmaking or tried to make a film. But another thing that we need to talk about is field of view, because that can affect stability. If you're zoomed in on something, it's going to be harder to make your footage look stable. But if you have a wide field of view and you're shaking your camera, that's not going to be as noticeable.
Definitely, of course, that's a huge impact on whether you get super smooth shots, because if you have like super zoomed in, every tiny movement is going to look like you're just jerking right off the subject. But when you're wide, you can still move it a little bit, and maybe the corners change a little bit, but it's not really noticeable. But when you're super zoomed in, it's really important to get smooth shot to like really stay steady. As where you're zoomed out, it can be a lot easier. And that's why a lot of people, when they're using gimbals and such, they use wide-angle lenses to get the smoothest shots possible.
Exactly.
Yeah, even I.
Yeah, go on, Andrew.
Oh, sorry. No, you can go ahead, James.
I was just going to go quite far back to when Orion was talking about the camera strap, just while we're still on stability. I saw a video, and it was actually Andrew's, and he was talking about having more than 1 or 2 points of contact. So you could rest your camera on your knee if you wanted to get a stable, not really moving shot. If you didn't have a tripod, put it against your chest or your face. And you can also, I saw another video, I'm not sure how to pronounce his surname, but Peter McKinnon or something like that. He did a while back, he did a something like 5 camera hacks or 10 camera hacks in 90 seconds. And I saw him use a belt as a camera stabilizer. He would tie the camera into the belt in this little loop and hold the rest of the strap up, and he would swing it whichever way he wanted to, and that would give him a nice stable shot. And it was, when you saw the results of that, it was pretty, surprising, and you're just thinking, why have I never thought of that? Why have I never tried it? So just be creative. Like I have a Joby GorillaPod. I don't actually have any other tripod other than this mini flexible tripod, and because my other one broke, but leaving me with this has forced me to be creative. So obviously you have to prop it up on trees, prop it up on rocks. Even if I'm filming in this room, I have to stack a few books just to get the shot I want. So it's leading also onto taking more than one try, and just keep practicing and attempting the same shot until you get it really nicely.
Yeah, definitely. And before Jake brought up to film for your edit, the movement and stability, it's very important to think of your edit first, because maybe you want to have just super smooth edit. You're going for super smooth, you're making a travel film and you want it super smooth, everything, but maybe you want it super jerky and more vloggy style. Maybe you want super like pans all over the place. So it's important to film for the edit. You need to decide kind of before what your edit's going to look like, and then when you go out there, you're going to have a much clearer vision when you're shooting on what kind of movement and how stable you want your shots to be. And something that I do is usually I kind of have an idea in my mind of what kind of music I'm going to use. And that also affects a lot the kind of movement or stability that I'm going to get. Because if it's like super intense rap music or something like that, you might want a little bit more shaky. But if it's like classical music, you might want really smooth movement shots and things like that. And another thing that's super important is composition, which we haven't touched on yet. Composition is everything, because you can have like the most beautiful that's not a good example. Let's say you're inside a city and there's a lot of stuff, people moving around you, but there's a really beautiful plant in the middle of the whole chaos. So if you frame your shot with all the people in it, it might not look very good, but if you just get the plant, it might look a lot better. So composing your shots, seeing actually what your camera is going to look at is very important, and will get you a much better image. Because sometimes people don't really think about it. They see what they want to shoot and they just turn on their camera. But it's good to always think before and see, oh, there's this little tree here, and if I turn my camera a little bit left, I'll be able to see it and it'll look a lot better.
So recently I saw, I think it was, sorry, Andrew.
No, go ahead, James, sorry. What? Okay,
so recently I saw a video, it may have even been an advert, and it was just showing how composition can completely change the story. So what it was a camera. It was placed on a tripod probably a few feet off the ground, zoomed in up to the top of a building, and the shot looked really tranquil. You couldn't see any people. It was just the building there, beautiful colors all around and shining on the building. And then it talked about if you took the tripod a few inches, maybe a foot down, and you see people's heads and the upper part of their body moving, it was nearly the exact same shot, but bringing it down just that little bit, you could see everyone walking in the street, and you could see the chaos. So it really changed the story from really tranquil and peace to sort of an early morning, rush hour, go to work sort of time. So composition really does affect your story and how you're trying to portray what's going on around you to your audience, to your viewers. And I think
so
I mean,
go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you had something to say.
Well, while we're on the topic of composition, I mean, I used to personally not really take composition as seriously as I wish I had back in the day, because composition is not a joke. It's one of the most important, arguably the most important aspect of filmmaking, or at least directing photography. And it's not a joke because there are literally things that have been proven to be aesthetically pleasing to the human eye. There are ratios, a couple of things. The most classic would be the rule of thirds. That's something that has been proven to be aesthetically pleasing to our eye. Or the golden ratio, that's another one of those things. And then there's things like leading lines. That's something I've been looking for a lot more recently. Lines that lead to the subject so that you draw your audience's eyes to the subject. Which the whole point of filmmaking, one of the main goals is to learn how to have control over where your audience's eyes look on the screen. So if you can control that using ratios, rule of thirds, or leading lines and things like that, it's a very powerful tool. And once again, it's arguably one of the most important things to know in filmmaking.
Yeah, definitely.
And so in school, I have an art class, and we were learning about movement and how lines can draw your attention to different parts of a drawing or a picture. So this can also tie into videography or photography, where you can have movement or lines that tries to draw the eyes closer to your subject. Or if you're doing something like a transition, you could have movement away or lines away from that to transition to another subject. So, and all of this sort of ties into what is pleasing to the human eye, what is pleasing to certain people. And that's just something that you really need to think about when you're filming and whenever you're actually creating a film.
And going on top of what's pleasing to the eye, another huge thing that makes the image look better or worse is the lighting you're shooting at. Because you can shoot the most beautiful landscape, but you have this harsh light coming, midday light, and it's not going to look very good. But if you're shooting at golden hour and it's nice soft lighting and your whole sky is orange, it's gonna look a whole lot better.
And also,
go on, Jake.
go ahead. I was just going to say something really fast. People have different opinions and they prefer different lightings. So
Of course.
one person may not like a lighting situation and another person might. So it is opinionative, and I think that's a word. And
Personal
yeah,
preference.
so not everyone's going to like the type of lighting you have, and that's just something to remember.
And I see here a comment from Jim Hill who says never shoot in midday. But this is, again, it's really there's the rules that that people tell you to follow. But once you know the rules, it's important to also break them, because maybe you're shooting a super textured rock and the midday sun makes it super harsh and brings out all of the textures. Whereas if you're shooting someone's face, shooting in golden hour might be a lot better because you have nice even lighting on the person's face. Whereas in midday sun, you're gonna get raccoon eyes and gonna get shadows on their face and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
I like what you said about. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I like what you said about breaking the rules, because I actually heard a quote from Hans Zimmer, and obviously he's music, not video, but they're two linked together. And he said, innovation is only created when people break the rules. Breaking the rules pushes innovation. I don't know if that was an original quote or not, but it's very true. So I think there's a fine line, and I think it's important to every once in a while break the rules. And then it's also important, though, to follow the rules too, because to some extent rules are put in place for a reason, but it's innovation is pushed through breaking the rules. So yeah. That's just kind of a thought. That wasn't really a point.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, because we have all of these rules that we could follow, but if everyone follows those rules, where are we gonna get? There's nothing to discover. You can't learn without mistakes.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great opinion. If you just keep doing the same thing over and over and people just follow the rules, no one in filmmaking isn't going to progress. But if suddenly someone tries to shoot this at this angle and this light with this composition, people are going to say, wow, and then other people are going to try it, and the filmmaking is going to progress, and people are going to discover new things that look beautiful. And it's really important to learn the rules and then know how to break them and make them your own as well.
And it can be hard at times, because you're pushing into new territory. Because everyone's afraid to fail. There's some fear in everyone of failing, and whenever you stop following the rules, there's a possibility you might fail. So I think that's one of the reasons why some people become great filmmakers and some people don't. Some people can just,
Yeah. Without failure, you won't learn as well. So say you break the rules and, afterwards you think that didn't really work very well. Or you've just learned a whole lesson, and you can just completely, either stick to the rules and be creative and change the rules slightly, or you just go for a whole new approach and you think about how you could completely change how you broke the rules in the first place and it didn't work out. And completely just maybe even one thing needs to change to make that work. So yeah.
And I see here Tua said that he says that videos are really like art. There's no perfect style. It really comes down to opinion and preference. And I think that's a great quote, because everyone has different preference and everyone thinks different stuff are beautiful and different stuff look good. So just stick to what you look good. Don't try to go with what the filming industry says and what directors have made up over the years. What looks good for you is what you should be doing, I think, because everyone thinks different. Everyone has different opinions.
And go ahead, Andrew.
We do. But I was just gonna say, it's so true, because even movies, movies that have millions and millions of dollars on, people disagree with whether or not they're good.
Yeah.
Everyone has movies. For instance, I like the movie King Arthur. Critics hated it with the burning, fiery passion. But it just comes down to personal preference. So you can make the most brilliant piece of work, and some people are going to like it, and some people are going to dislike it. So just find your own style, like Atua said, and make it your own, and try to make it and try to hone your ability to the best of your ability.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've been talking about, we shared our opinions for quite a while, teach some stuff. So I think now's a good time to go to the chat, because there's a whole bunch of that chat is just popping with so many people.
Yes.
So I think if you guys would like to just answer a few things from the chat. So if you guys have any questions now, we're going to be going for about another 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes maybe. So if you have any questions right now, just leave them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer.
Now's the time.
The best we can.
Go for it.
Yeah. So Oliver wants to know, what's the most versatile lens in your guys' opinion? Go ahead, Andrew.
I don't think I'd be the best person to speak about this because I just use the stock lens that came with my DSLR, and it's an 18 to 55.
Oliver says, if you could have any lens though. What do you think the most versatile lens out there for a video creator that's starting out who wants to start making videos, a YouTuber per se? What do you think the most versatile lens they could get for them?
It completely comes down to what you're planning on shooting.
Yeah.
For cinematics, I'd say in my opinion, the most versatile lens would be a 35mm. But for vlogs, a necessary lens is at least a wide angle, so at least like a 10, or at least like a 15 to a 10mm. I would go with a 10 to 18mm, the one that I have, simply because it's perfect for vlogging. At least what I'm doing, it gets everything in frame, so it's necessary. So I don't think you can choose one most versatile lens, unless you know what you're shooting for.
When I was buying my T5i, my 700D, I saw obviously you can get the kit lens, the 18 to 55, but I didn't really I knew that I would want to change my lens eventually. So there's no point in obviously buying a bundle, and obviously part of your money is going into that lens if I knew I was gonna not use that lens too much. So instead of buying the bundle with the kit lens 18 to 55, I bought the 18 to 135, which I still use now, which in my opinion I really like. It's just wide enough so I could vlog. It's 18mm. Obviously it could be wider, but I also love the fact that I can zoom in quite a lot, and I really like the fact I'm happy myself in the purchase because I've actually saved a lot of money rather than maybe buying an 18 to 55, realizing it can't zoom in enough. I want to capture some wildlife moving around, and then I have to buy another lens, and I would have wasted a lot of money. So just think about, before you buy a lens or a camera or anything really, just think about and research what you really want to use your lens for. So in my opinion, the 18 to 135 for me is really nice and versatile, in my opinion, and I'm happy with my purchase.
Nice. And Jim Hill here has a good question, and he asked if we think the story is better than the film, or is better for the film than the shots. And I think that totally, I said it earlier, you can have all this fancy camera equipment, you can have perfect movement and the most stable, and have all the nice apertures and all of that, but if you're not shooting, if your story is not interesting, nobody's going to care. You can have a red camera on a drone and shoot a baby running around his backyard. Nobody's gonna care. But the story is always king, no matter your equipment. But we're just talking about how to get. But the equipment obviously also matters. The story is king, but the equipment still matters. So that's kind of just trying to help you out with the equipment. But I think that definitely story is king in filmmaking.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, I agree with that, because I think you look, and no hate to these guys, I'm actually a huge fan, but if you look at people like Sam Coulter, once again, no hate, I love him, Sam Coulter, J.R. Ollie, Nano Langer, people like them, I think that's the one thing that lacks their videos from being a masterpiece. Every once in a while, they will have stories embedded, like Sam Coulter's France video, but I think those videos are great, and they're aesthetically pleasing, and it's fun to watch them, but I think it would be way better if they could tell a story throughout their videos a little bit more. So I think what I personally do is I get inspired by them as a DP, a director of photography, but I let that inspiration stop there so that I don't get stuck in this trance almost of just continually just making aesthetically pleasing edits and things like that. So I couldn't agree with you more. The story always trumps the edit or the photography.
Yeah, but I think you can also tell a story by aesthetically pleasing images. It doesn't have to be just by talking. There's so many, you can tell a story by just just some images with some music, and it can have a much bigger impact than you just rambling on about it. It really depends on what you like and what kind of message you want to bring, and the how you want to deliver your message.
And also, you have to decide what I guess you could say genre of video that you're creating, because would you guys agree that trying to create a story from a vlogger's point of view, so which is more spontaneous, trying to create a story from that is much harder than creating a story when you're in control of everything and making a short film? Would you agree that vlogging and creating a story at the same time is much harder?
Although you do have the, when you're vlogging, you do speak. So obviously when you vlog, many people now I see they vlog and they include cinematic sequences or just B-roll. And obviously you have the option to speak, but sometimes it doesn't connect with the audience as well as maybe just completely silent, or obviously you could have sound but not talking, not just directly saying, hey, this is what I'm videoing, this is what I want to show you. Which is, that's the great thing about videos and the power of what the creative mind can do.
For sure. And Patrice has a good question here, and she asks, what do you guys think about compact cameras with small sensors and wide range zooms? For example, 30 times zoom or stuff like that. I am actually using a camera like that. It's called the Canon SX60HS. And it's up in between of a point and shoot and a DSLR. It has a 1-inch sensor, which is like a point and shoot sensor. But it's in a form factor of a DSLR, and it has an insane zoom. It goes from 24 to 1,345 millimeters. Like, they don't make lenses like that. They don't. Yeah, it's insane. But the downside you're going to get on something like that is the quality isn't going to be as good and as sharp. The zoom lenses are they're always less sharp than prime lenses, because they have to pack all of that zoom range into a lens, whereas a prime, they can really focus on the sharpness because it's just one focal length. And the more you go up in the range of your zoom, so example, mine goes up 1,300 millimeters in between the highest and the lowest, it can really affect the quality. But I think if you're vlogging, it can be still quite a good lens, because you can really, a good camera, because you can really get those wide shots still, but then you don't have to buy a new lens. If you're going for a budget too, it's great because it's just one built-in lens and still has good quality.
Yeah, just adding on that, Orion, you surf, obviously, and you, I don't know who films it for you, but obviously you're quite far out. So your camera actually does really well because you can zoom all the way into you, whereas something like a DSLR, you would have to pay thousands and thousands and thousands to get a zoom.
For a telephoto lens.
Yeah, so it would, when I have a camera very similar, I don't think it zooms in as much, but it was very surprising to me. I was like, how come they don't sell, how come the lenses are so expensive for DSLRs that don't even zoom as much as this one? And obviously once I've been using it, you do start to understand it's not the best quality, but it's still great for telling the story. For example, Orion, who surfs out in the sea, obviously.
Yeah, because you obviously can't see me surfing if you're using a 10mm lens, because a kilometer inside the ocean. But with my lens, you can really zoom in and actually see what I'm doing.
Yeah, real quick, if I could, there's sort of a debate going on down in the chat about whether or not stories and vlogs are important, and we're all vloggers here, so I thought that was really interesting to address. In my personal point, my personal perspective on this topic is I think a story in vlogs is absolutely making the video better as a whole. Someone said it, I think it was Jim, he said that that's why Casey was so popular and so successful, was because he didn't just, you have to sort of have a history perspective. Back in the day, vlogs were people walking around just talking to the camera and just showing their day, and that's what a vlog was. Until Casey Neistat came in and he revolutionized the entire industry of vlogging by adding a real story to it. He talks about how he has a classic 3-act story, setup, conflict, resolution in all of his vlogs pretty much. So I think story really does add a new element to it. Logan Paul, I'm not a huge fan of him, But if you watch his videos, there are distinct stories in his videos, and they're not vlogs. It's not me just walking around with a camera filming my day. It's a story, and he's massive, and he's hugely successful. It's almost like a reality TV show. And I think a big reason why he is so successful is because there's a story that's more than just what he's doing that day, a story that he's actually thought out, and the audience can recognize that.
Yeah. But I do see here in the chat that people are talking about if you should plan out a story for a vlog or if it should just come spontaneously through the day. And I think there's two sides to that. Obviously, being spontaneous is great, and for vlogs, especially if you're doing daily vlogs, things like that, you don't have a lot of time to plan out your story. And even if you're not doing daily vlogs, overthinking it can sometimes lead to confusion and making it not as good and not as focused.
And being stressed out too.
And being stressed out. Yeah, but especially for someone like Casey, when he was daily vlogging, he couldn't really think ahead of time, what am I going to do my video about today? But he sort of went out through the day, and through the day he told little stories about what was going on. And I think,
well, and oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jake.
All right, this is just really fast. I just wanted to say that there's a difference between planning your day out, planning a story for your day, than there is planning how you're going to film. So are you going to let your filming affect how your day goes, or are you going to plan out what you're going to film and accommodate that to your day?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, well, I personally have been doing daily vlogging for over a month now. I've missed a few days, but while I've been doing these daily videos, I don't actually have the time to think of a three-act story, but a lot of times I'll at least have what I call the meat of the video, something that'll probably be the title and the thumbnail, and something that's going to take up the portion of the vlog, because my life isn't always that interesting. I'm really not doing that many interesting things, but if you have some meat, like a body of your video, it really does add a lot. So it doesn't have to be a whole story. It just has to have something there, you know?
So a climax, that would be the climax, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like
something to lead up to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think
yeah, go on, Orion.
We've been going on for an hour and 15, so I think one more question.
Let's see.
And we'll end this. So if you guys have any questions that you want answered, write them down right now, and we'll be picking one.
What do you think about drones?
Let's see.
I guess they don't have.
See, I think it's a little bit of a delay until they see. There you go.
Yeah.
What is life?
What is life?
42. Well, at least that's the answer that Google gives you if you look it up.
And Luna, you has a great question. How did you learn all of this? And I think this is a really important thing, because a lot of people don't really know how to learn, or a lot of people still think that you need to go to film school to learn all of these filming techniques. But the truth is, I learned everything on YouTube. I don't know about you guys. I just learned on YouTube, and through watching other people's videos, you kind of learn yourself. After a while, you really, how do I say this? You've learned enough where you can just watch someone else's work, and you can figure out what they're doing, and you can learn from that as well. And this is a subject I see a lot of debate on YouTube, which is copying people, and a lot of people saying it's okay to copy, a lot of people saying that it's really bad, and calling people out for copying. And I think that copying is good to learn, and then you make it your own. I, for example, in the beginning when I started, I had no idea how to do this whole vlogging or filmmaking thing. So I copied Casey Neistat a lot, and through seeing what he does, I learned it and I made it my own. So without copying or knowing how to do something, you can't make your own original content.
Yeah. On that point, actually, it's really interesting. I made a video about copying a little while ago, but I love to. And it sounds bad when you use the word copy, but I love to copy people's styles and techniques, not because I'm making like original works. I'd never do it for something that I was really working on for like multiple weeks or months. But for YouTube videos to learn, it's so important to mimic other people's styles because you learn so much. For instance, a couple weeks ago, I filmed an intro for my video, and the way that I came up with the idea to film that intro was I took a video by J.R. Ollie, And I took that, I downloaded that video onto my computer. I chose my favorite parts from it. And then I realigned those. I changed the sort of timeline of it. And then I went out and tried to film clips that looked exactly like that and edit it in that way. In the end, it was completely different. It was still my own piece of work, but because of the inspiration I took from him, it was one of my best intros. So it's really important to mimic other people's styles, I think.
Yeah.
To
Yeah, the key word is inspiration, and not just the idea given from that video.
And I know we said just one more question, but I see a really great question here from Oliver, and he says, "What's the biggest one lesson you've learned on YouTube?" So I think just go through you guys. So starting at Andrew, and then each one says their opinion, and then we can end the stream.
Okay.
So Andrew, what do you think is the biggest thing you've learned through YouTube, through making videos?
The biggest thing I've learned through making videos on YouTube, and we've talked about this a little bit, but it's having a plan, an idea for the video you're going to make before you go out and shoot. That's part of the reason why I took the JR Ollie video and edited it up beforehand I went out and shot. But if you have an idea in your mind of what you want your video to look like beforehand, it will drastically increase just the how organized your video is and just make your video a lot better. So if you have an idea of what kind of transitions, what kind of shots, what kind of mood, or even like Orion said, what kind of music you're going to use, it will make your videos so much better in the end. So that's the biggest thing I've learned.
All right, awesome. Jake, what about you?
The number one thing I learned from YouTube is making something relatable. People like whenever they see something or watch something that's relatable that they can incorporate into their own lives and that they can learn something from. Even if it's not something that is informational, if you can relate to it and say, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about," that connection that you can create in your films or vlogs is really huge, and it's part of the reason why I think people click on that subscribe button too.
Yeah. What about you, James?
It's sort of also the same as Andrew in a slightly different way, that it's more, obviously I do think about you plan in a way what music you're going to listen to, all of that. But also you've got to plan, you've got to think about who's watching your videos, who's gonna be interested in it. So if you've got to stay in a way consistent, not as if you make the same sort of video. So I've made camera gear videos, I've made adventures, and they're two very different things. But what you talk about and what you show in those can be very similar in a way that, for example, I've done adventures where I've actually taught things. So like I did an adventure to go and do photography and learn myself, and also teach the viewers a new method of photography that I was learning. And also obviously in that camera gear video, I could also teach people maybe about camera settings and things like that. So it's more, think about what your viewers are going to be interested in. And I found myself so many times cutting out just me rambling on about something that no one is going to be interested in. And I've just sort of in my head thought, I'm just going to say this to try and make the video, a little bit longer, but it's just not worth it. So you've got to really think about who's watching your videos.
Yeah.
Your demographic. Yeah.
For me, I've learned so much through YouTube, because before YouTube, I didn't know how to make film. I didn't know how to video. I made a little bit from like surfing videos of me, but just taking like the best surf clips and putting it on a timeline with music, and that's it. But I've learned so much about story and cameras and all of these things through making YouTube videos. But I think the one thing I've learned that's been the most useful for me is that people want to connect with you. I think, Jake, you said something similar. If people really want to learn more about you and connect with you, some videos I've made that are super nice looking and just have super beautiful scenery and nice B-roll and stuff like that, but people didn't like it as much because they didn't connect with me. They didn't feel like I was telling them something, or they couldn't relate to it. But a video where I talked a little bit about something that happened, or an experience that's happened to me that other people connect with and that's happened to them and relate with, it's done really well. And people really like to connect with a person, because otherwise you're just figure they're watching on the internet. But if they can connect with you, they really get to know you and feel like you're a friend.
You couldn't have said it more perfectly, Orion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is a good time to end. We've been going on for an hour and 20 minutes. Honestly, this has been so fun, guys. I could just go on for hours upon hours just talking about these subjects. But we don't want to bore these viewers. And they all have busy lives. I know you guys are all busy, got stuff to do. So I think it's a good time to end this live stream. Seriously, guys, thank you so much for joining. It was so fun. Great having you on the round table. I think everyone here enjoyed it very much by looking at the chat. And if you guys don't know these amazing creators, we have Andrew James, Jake Truman, James Beardwell. They all create amazing content. I put all of their links down in the description where you can go check them out. Seriously, I highly recommend all of them. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for sticking around for an hour and a half watching us rambling on. And we'll see you guys next time.
Go out and film.
Thank you, guys.